Hi, so glad you could join us today. My name's Linda, and I'm the host here at Inspired by Her Story, where we gather, we enjoy a cup of coffee, and we just share stories. Have you ever had times that have just been full of difficulties and it just seems like they add up one after another after another? Well, my guest today, Daffney Nance, has had this happen here to share her story. I just want to introduce my new friend, Daffney Nance. Good, welcome, Daffney. How are you doing today?
I'm well, thank you for inviting me to speak on your platform again.
Great.
Appreciate it.
This is going to be fun tonight. So, tell me a little bit about yourself, Daffney. Well, where do you live?
I currently live in Arlington, Virginia,
Virginia.
and I've lived here since 2003. So it's been about 20 years now, almost 20 years in May. So
Okay. So your kids have basically grown up there then.
they have grown up here. Yes, they have.
Yeah. So where does your story start then?
I actually thought it started when I got married. But when I look back and I really take the time to dig deep, I think it started when I was a young child and I just didn't realize it.
Oh, okay.
And when we stop and we focus on our inner child and we focus on learning how to heal and to move forward, sometimes we realize that there's other areas that actually affected our adult life that we didn't really realize.
That happens a lot.
It does.
Yeah. Yeah. So was there anything in particular about your childhood?
Well, there were several things I would say. First of all, I was hit by a garbage truck.
Oh,
Second of all,
wow.
and I survived. And second of all, my parents had a business, and I'll never forget my dad said he was going to leave the business to us. And I was not interested in having the business mindset when now I'm an entrepreneur. But I didn't realize back then that I was headed that direction. I never thought of it because we were required to work from a very young age and go to school, and it was just really hard. Not only was it that, but there was abuse in the household, which I was not aware of, because for my age limit, when people were growing up, these standards or rules were different, or maybe how parents raised their children. Looking back now, I can really see how there were forms of physical and mental abuse in there.
Yeah. Oh, certainly parenting was a lot different then. Um, it just was. Yeah, it just was.
It was, but I think that even with the strict parenting that we might have had during that time frame of when I grew up, I think that there's a way to discipline your children, but not to an extreme. And I think that's where the difference was for me. There was an extreme of, and I can remember specific stories or episodes in my past where there were times when I was very afraid. That shouldn't be like that as a child. You should have like a childlike mindset and grow up in a nurturing environment and have people who love you and support you and encourage you. Unfortunately, I didn't have that.
Right. So then you grew up as a quiet girl
Uh,
and
yes, I was kind of overweight as well. And so, where I was big boned, as they might say, in that era, larger individuals were not really looked highly upon. And so it was kind of interesting because, I was not the favorite even within my family. And I was kind of like the outcast. And that's kind of hard, growing up as a child. You want to be loved and nurtured.
right. So you had some insecurities then.
A lot, yes.
Okay. Um, so how old were you when you got married?
Oh, goodness. I was about 26. So, a couple events before that, I actually had graduated with my bachelor's degree after I lived in Zimbabwe, Africa for a year.
Oh,
And
wow.
I kind of knew that like I wanted to help people and I wanted to go in that field. And I had got my social work degree, came back. I worked with a group home with adults, women who had mild to severe disabilities. And then I got this grandiose idea I was going to get my master's and move to Oklahoma. And I moved myself out there, and I had 1 year in, 1 year to go. And of course, I thought I was in love, got married, and wow, There were red flags. I see your smile on your face. There were a lot of red flags.
Yeah.
And I had warnings from people, but I think that sometimes when we're insecure, when we have rough childhoods, we just really are looking for love and wanting to be
Yeah.
loved.
Yeah.
And when that person gives us that love, like I don't think anyone can tell you anything, because you finally found what you were searching, what you were looking for, and it's difficult. It's difficult to really hear what other people are saying, and especially when you're young like that and you think you're invincible and things like that.
Well, and so in that era, those years, 26 would have been older to be single too.
Correct.
So now it's fine.
Yeah,
Nowadays it's fine. And it's it's good to get an education and to be secure in who you are. But back in those days, there was expectations.
there were expectations, and I was not really grown up into a Christian family. We didn't really go to church much when I was younger. I knew about it. Sometimes we were involved in church, sometimes we weren't after my parents split. It was really a mess. It was really a mess. And unfortunately, it shaped my future. So, like I said, ultimately, the thing what I was looking for was love. I mean, somebody who's so insecure, doesn't think they're worth much, doesn't think that they can accomplish anything. In high school, I was told I was never amount to anything. So, when you constantly hear those stories over and over in your head, you start to believe it because essentially mentally, that's where your mind and your brain goes to if you don't have the correct nutrients in order to, prepare your brain for something else.
Right. And that's, I mean, words, there's a lot of power in our words.
There is.
There's a lot of power in our words because that's, I mean, we hear the words our entire lives.
Yes,
Yeah.
we
So,
do.
so you were married. How many kids do you have?
So I have 4 children.
Okay.
I was married for 15 years. They
Okay.
were very long. They were very hard. It was abusive, mentally, physically, spiritually. I would pray and ask God why. I would pray and ask God to change my ex-husband. I would pray and ask God to change me. Like I just didn't know what it was. I tried marriage counseling. In the process, I had 4 C-sections. In the last C-section, when I left with staples, my doctor told me that if I didn't get my tubes tied, I would probably die on the operating table. And my ex-husband never knew because he told me that he would not get taken care of. And I need to get taken care of and didn't want to get taken care of. And I just finally made the decision that my life was too important, that I wasn't going to have the 6 children because I just medically could not. But still, it just really shows where the value of my life was placed at. And it was unfortunate, but I have 4 beautiful children and have since moved on from my very, very abusive situation. We lived in a shelter, we've lived in the car, we've lived in hotels. For the longest time, my children did not have the correct environment to possibly live in. But I think that when people say, why didn't you do better? Why didn't you do different? And I don't think people realize sometimes when you're in a situation like I was, it's more about survival,
Mhm.
staying alive, and making sure your children are safe.
Yeah. And it's often a day by day.
It is a day by day basis, and
Yeah.
you have to be very particular about your decisions. One of the things that remained was that we were very isolated because my ex husband was a narcissistic or has a narcissistic personality disorder. And with that, you just have to be really careful on how you handle things and how you deal with things. And, fortunately, I'm a survivor. Unfortunately, there are a lot of people out there that don't make it. And I'm just very grateful and very thankful that God protected me and my children, and we were able to make it out.
So the way that statistics say is when a woman leaves, they go back 7 times or around 7 times. So were
Yes.
you able to stay out before that?
So in December 2012 was the first time I left, and I went to a homeless shelter. And I swear I wasn't going to go back. And I believe it was around in April of the next year. I was like, okay, we tried to rekindle things. So that was the first time that I had gone back. And in about 2015, when he pushed me and I did a death drop, and I just said I had enough because I had to go pick up my daughters from like extended day check-in, like childcare. And my daughter looked at me and she said, "Mommy, you okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm okay. Nothing happened. I just fell." You know, when your child knows something is wrong and you're having to lie to your child, that's not cool. And there was that time that I was like, I've had enough. This is it. And so I guess you could say I went back once, and that was enough for me. You know, but unfortunately, people like my ex-husband or women who are in those situations are so afraid to leave. Or, you know, for my situation where I had nothing, like he had control of finances, the car, the keys, like everything. So, you know, at any moment I could have lost everything.
Yeah,
So it's really, I can see why people go back continuously, because it's a really big risk to take to step out of that environment. But I knew I wanted better, and I didn't want my children to grow up like that.
great. So you had full custody then?
I do have full custody of my children. It took 1 year with legal aid, and then legal aid told me they were going to drop me because um, my ex-husband would constantly take me back to court. So I prayed, and fortunately, I got a really good lawyer because I could never afford my attorney fees. My court case probably would cost about $400,000, which was never charged to me. And I was very blessed with an awesome attorney. I did a lot of the paralegal stuff, but she helped out a lot. And I went to court probably about 64, I think we counted 64, 65 times within four
Oh my
years.
gosh, that's a lot.
So it was constantly, there were times when my ex-husband would drop my children off at my door because they do have medical conditions and mental conditions. So like at 5 a.m. when he didn't want to take one of my children, he would say it was my turn to have the kids before custody was lost. And say you have to take her to Baltimore to get her infusion. So I'd have to call out of work. Or, you know, there would be times when I would have to take off work, or like the first year I had probably lost about $1,200 in pay just because I had to, you know, constantly keep taking off to take care of my kids. And, you know, as a single parent, we wonder like, where's up? Like in all this chaos and this nonsense, where's up? And when does it end? And when does it stop? And even though I'm like in a really good spot now, there are still times when I deal with issues or instances with the situation that has occurred in the past. So even though we move forward, we still deal with issues of the past, or still deal with some things that may have happened that we thought we took care of, but they still need to be dealt with. And so we just have to remain positive that we're going to constantly go up. And I'll never forget some of my darkest days crying in my pillow, or going in the bathroom and turning the shower on and just crying because I didn't know what else to do. You know, it's just me. I didn't have family or friends around me. Or, you know, initially when I was in the shelter, we'd get up at 3 a.m. I dropped my kids off to the babysitter. I'd go to work. So not only was I impacted, my children were impacted as well. Um, but you do what you have to do in order to move forward and to make it forward. And I'm sure there's a lot of other women out there that are saying, I'm right there with you. I have to do the same thing. And
Yeah.
it's not easy, it's hard.
And unfortunately there's too many women in this situation. So what happened that changed it, that really spurred you into some hope?
I would say, I think it was just day by day being able to put one foot in front of the other. We had a lot of support from like therapists, in-home therapists and things and stuff like that. I did have a mentor from my church, so that was very helpful. She met with me like once a week, kind of on call initially at first. She said they only normally stay about 3 to 6 months. She ended up staying like 3 years, but that was really helpful, just having at least one person of support.
Right,
I think the other thing too was like I had goals for myself. One thing is when we first moved in here, we only had cots and a dining room table and some kitchen stuff. So like April was like, we moved in February. April was like the next slot. Okay, we could get furniture. So it's kind of like small steps,
right,
like with the taxes. So we got our furniture, and then, you know, just year by year went by. And uh, I moved into my apartment in 2016, and so every February we celebrate. We made new holidays, new traditions. Like in January, we do root beer floats, and like at Thanksgiving, we do a holiday punch, like ginger ale and Hawaiian punch. Or I know they sound like really simple, little stupid, crazy things, but to us, they're really big because they're those new traditions that we made
Yeah.
that each of the children and I look forward to, every year. And so, with that being said, it was like the little traditions helped us get to the next spot. In 2018, I finally said to myself, if I don't do something for myself, I'm going to die. And I think it was just because I was so inundated as a single parent, raising my kids, going to work, just that hamster's wheel cycle. And so I decided to go back to school. I
Oh,
got my
wow. Good for you.
master's. Thank you. I decided to go back to school. I got my master's in special education, or I received my master's in special education in 2020 with COVID.
Good
Um,
for you, Daphne.
so I actually had a 4.0 while raising 4 children,
Wow.
and I was named Student of the Year, which I honestly thought was a scam. My kids will tell you it was a scam, but it
Good
was
for
very
you. That's
true.
impressive. Wow.
It, it wasn't anything. The 4.0, I'm not gonna lie, I was trying for that. But the Student of the Year or Student of the Year, whatever, teach
Yeah.
Student of the Year, whatever that is, the award. I was not trying for that. Definitely not. So, so yeah,
What's
definitely. So,
You'd
sorry.
said earlier you had your first year of masters. So were you able to put the courses together? You had to start over.
I had to start totally over.
Okay.
So, and I actually was one of those people that like went right through, like normally people take summer breaks. Well, I didn't take my summer breaks. And I graduated a semester early because I didn't do my student teaching because I was able to roll everything in with my teaching now because I was an assistant teacher. So I
Okay.
didn't have to do the student teaching as long as I did the year's worth of teaching after I was done. So I kind of rolled things together and did what I needed to do, but still raising 4 children with mental and medical needs and going to school and working full time. I don't know if I was crazy or not, but I needed something that I could say that was mine, right? And
Wow.
going to school was mine. So
That's a huge accomplishment.
thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So that kind of set me on a different like trajectory as far as like if you want to say pay, quality of living, um, just a lot of different things. And as I was doing that, my children were growing up as well.
And
And
they're watching you.
they are watching
They're
me. And
watching you and they're saying, like, mom went back to school. Look how hard she's working. Look how hard she's studying. If mom
yeah,
can do it, I can do it. What a great
well,
example.
I hope that's the motto I left. Don't know. But one of the things I always told my children when I first moved into my apartment was that because children we know don't always like to do things that we as parents would want them to do. So one of the things I told my children was that if I do it, then you can do it. And so one of the things I did get myself involved in pretty quickly was getting psychological help or therapy. And my kids were not thrilled about that at all. And they were like, no. And I was like, look, if mom can do it, then you can do it. So I've always stood by that motto that if mom can do it, then you can do it. And I hope that I continue just to be like that shining light. Since my master's degree, I'm now in my third year of being a special education teacher. And in the process, I have started my own business called lovinglifetoday.org. And, I get to work with parents, I get to work with single parents, I get to work with, survivors of domestic violence. I can't imagine what it was like, how I survived those days when they were very dark. Um, I didn't know where the next day was going to come. The days when I knew court was coming up and I wondered if I was going to come home with my children. There was a time when my oldest actually was taken from me and was sent with her dad, and then was taken from her dad and sent back to me. And, these are all emotional feelings as women, as a mom, as a parent. Because I know there are single men out there as well that are deserving as the same title as single mom. And it's hard, and we wake up and we like, what are we going to do? And going through those days, it's so much easier said than done. And I'll never forget, like when court days were coming up, I would just get really nervous and be like, "Oh my God, are my kids going to come home this time?" Or, what's going to happen this time? And I had a really hard time with my ex-husband, and I didn't want him to have any visitation. I didn't want him to have any custody. And I had a really good lawyer, like I said, and she continued to advocate that they had some kind of relationship with their dad. And in the long run, I was really glad. And because I think about what would Jesus do? And, you know, we all have flaws. Um, we all have a past. And I'll never forget the day that the judge actually did finally take his rights away. I ran to the bathroom and I cried. And I never thought I would have had that reaction. And I think I cried because I hurt so bad for my children, because every child needs their mother and needs their father. And it's really important to co parent. And I have seen the effects on myself because I don't have my father. And I've now seen the effects on my children, them not having their father regularly involved in their lives. And, you know, I would just hope that parents or parents that have children learn how to co-parent properly, because it's really important. And I think that makes a difference as well, because in that process, not only do the children win out, but the parents win out as well, because we all need a break, right? I mean, I work 24/7 is what I say is my running joke to my kids, right? Because when do I actually rest?
Yeah,
You know, because as a parent, we're always on the go and we're always on alert, even when our children are grown and
yeah,
they move out of the house. You know, I still keep in touch with my older children, and if they call and say, "Hey, mom, I need something," just like you would, you'd be like, "What can I do to help you?" So once a parent, always a parent. But it's been a road. It's been a roller coaster, but it's really neat to see my progression. And I say all the time, from hell to victory, you know, because I'm living my best life. The last 7 years have been really hard, but they have been like the best, because now I'm the best that I can be. And I can look in the mirror and say, I actually love myself. You know, and there were times throughout my life where I wouldn't look in the mirror. I didn't like pictures taken. I was like, oh, forget it, whatever.
yeah.
So, life is transformed. It really is transformed.
So with what would you say helped you to love yourself?
Ooh, that's a good one. I think watching my children having the same negative thought process that I did, first of all. I think the other thing too was that it was just a combination of like I statements of like looking in the mirror and saying, I love you, I love you. That was the hardest thing. They say 30 days, you know, you start to form that repetition and then it starts to become a habit. And by 90 days, it does. And um, I'm not going to lie, you know, I still have that roller coaster time where there's times where I think, oh my God, look at me. Ah, I hate you. And I'm like, wait a minute, what's wrong? You know, so I think, you know, it's kind of like a roller coaster at times. But it really was just the fact of saying that, you know, I'm worth it. I am worth it. I am a person who matters. I'm a person who's important. And I deserve to be treated like everybody else. And so changing your mindset and having that understanding of who you are, because you really have to learn how to get rid of all those negative thoughts. You have to realize for like 30 some years of my life, I think it's 30 some years, maybe about like, let's say 38 years of my life, I had all this negativity in my life. And a lot of it conditioned my mind and my brain.
Yes.
So like reading books and listening to self-help tapes and, you know, talking to other people. And I really had to retrain my mind that I am an actual human being who is worthy to be understood, to matter, to be respected, to have that confidence, and not allow people to walk over me. You know, a lot of us have a difficult time saying no when we're insecure. I think that's become my favorite word with my kids. It's no longer a yes, it's a maybe or a wait.
Yeah, yeah,
They don't like me, but before I would have just been like, yes, okay. Or they could wear me down, because when you're tired and they keep pestering, you finally give in, right?
yeah.
And they don't like me anymore because now I say wait or maybe. I'm like, well, sorry, deal with
You know,
it.
tomorrow.
Yeah, but I wasn't like that before. I was just so vulnerable. And as I learned that I was okay and I felt safe and I felt like my basic needs were met, like shelter, clothing, food. Um, when I felt at that point that those things were finally met, I was slowly able to start unraveling, because most of my life was a life of survival. And I
Mhm.
think that's for a lot of people who are in abusive situations. And so once you start to feel safe, which they even talk about with Maslow's hierarchy, then you're able to move forward, right? So that I think just the combination of those things actually allowed me to get to that point. But it's taken years to get here. It wasn't just like overnight once I left. I would
Right.
probably say about year 5, maybe between 5, 6 was when I could finally look in the mirror and say, "I love you," and, I'm priceless, like, if you're looking for me, you better make sure you got a lot of pennies in your pocket
Well, and
because I'm not.
it's not just like the confidence for what you've accomplished. I mean,
Yeah,
you've raised 4 kids and you've got your master's degree and you've got a good job and you've done all this, you've accomplished a lot, but that's not what makes you valuable.
right, what
It's
makes
who you were
yes,
created to be. It's how you
correct.
were
Well,
created. Just like
yeah.
and so what like have you discovered what you enjoy?
Oh gosh, it's funny
And you
because
had
when people
fun
ask me
and laugh,
yeah,
you know, because that's so important and that gives us confidence. When we
yeah, and
discover
it's
who we are by what we enjoy, we haven't done it for so long and we can be happy
yeah.
again.
And one of the things that and it's interesting you say that because when I think about it, like helping others is like my passion, like inspiring others, motivating others, like you can do it. I just had my assistant that I work with today. They're like, I used to think really negatively, but because I listen to you every day, I started to think more positively. And oh my gosh, that touched my heart.
Sure.
But that's really like my passion, right?
But
And
you're
so,
making a difference by what you say and how you show up and just
right.
release the positive around you.
Right, and that was one thing that I was not able to do while I was married. There were a lot of times when I wanted to help out, and my ex-husband said, "Oh no, we can't help out. We might get sued, or might this, or might that."
Mhm.
So it was like my passion was like stripped away from me. And so once I was removed from that situation and removed myself, I started helping people, and that really was what gave me my joy back. Excuse me, is being able to inspire others. I mean, and pretty much, we don't go through things by accident. It's all for an intention and a reason, right? And so I just really believe all of my hardships I've gone through to help others. And it is truly my passion to, motivate and inspire and just tell my story. And the book that I wrote, initially I was really afraid to share it because it is being very vulnerable, but in the process, I can only imagine if it's just one person who picks up my book or one person who sees the video and it saves their life, then pretty much I've done my job, right? And that's the important thing. And so you're right, there's that passion and there's that drive to be able to help others. And that's why I created my business, Loving Life Today. Because, man, when you learn to love life, you just, I don't know, it's so much easier. It really is a lot easier.
Yeah, and so much of it is a mindset of
It
being
is.
able to see the positive
Yes.
and just to be able to be thankful for what we have and enjoy life again.
Yeah. To think most of those years and how difficult it was and thinking like, if I only knew what I knew back then, how sometimes we say we have regrets. And I don't know that I really have any regrets. I just sometimes wish that there's this song and I forget it talks about how he speaks to the younger me. And I forget because I hear
Oh,
it on
dear
a
younger
Christian.
me,
Yeah, is that what it's
dear
called?
young. I don't know what it's
Oh,
called, but dear younger me. Yeah.
yeah, there you go. Uh-huh. And I think about that all the time when I hear that song. I was like, if I only knew what I know now, maybe I would have changed things, but it was all for a purpose and a reason. And it's made me a stronger person and it's made me have the opportunity to speak to others and say, look, if I can do it, then I know you can do it too. And so I just want to be someone else's cheerleader because it's difficult when you're going through it.
It's very difficult, but look at how strong you are and look at the woman you've become,
Yes.
you know. So would you have um any recommendations or encouragement specific for women who are still in this?
Well, safety is number one.
Yeah.
I just can't, oh goodness, I can't express that enough. And when we think about safety, that can look like in all forms and all kinds, and unfortunately, who each situation is different. And especially if children are involved. I know for myself, I stayed longer than I should have. And it was more so because I wanted my children to be growing up into a family, or I thought that was the best. There's two parents, blah, blah, blah. If there's kind of any abuse in the household, it's not okay for you to remain there. And I would hope that they could find refuge or shelter or some kind of way to make sure that they're in a safe environment. So safety is number one. And then kind of putting a strategy in place. And sometimes we don't know what that strategy is, and a lot of times people don't even know where to go. And like the Department of Human Services is like the first place to start with. And I know it has a very big stigma, and it's not the greatest. And I would agree with that. But sometimes when we're starting over, we need help and we need that support in order to be able to move forward. And it's not all bad. It really is not. And they're there to help you to get up off your feet and, get you back in the direction that you need to be in. I had to go the same route. I had to use the Department of Human Services and just slowly get up off of my feet and move forward. So it's kind of a catch-22 for people in situations like ours that may be in an abusive situation. But first and foremost, you need to make sure yourself and your children are safe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So any final thoughts? Just
Oh goodness, final thoughts. Love life. You know, I was I was listening to something the other day, and forgive me because I'm always listening. And I heard somebody saying something on a sermon about how we never know when death will occur. You
oh,
know, we always look and see and think it's down the road. But honestly, do we ever really know when our last breath will be taken? And the sermon was talking about if you were given 6 months to live, what would you do? If you're given 3 months to live, what would you do? How would you spend your time? What would you do? Blah, 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 blah. And it really made me think, because I don't think that we all think like that, because we don't want to. We think that we're immortal, right? But we're not. And, I really want people to just love life each and every moment that they have, because we don't get the time back. Time is very precious, and we just don't know. I mean, I had a friend whose husband was 52 years old. He was here one day and gone the next.
yeah,
They don't know what happened. They don't know why. Unfortunately, it does happen. And so it's more important to enjoy what we have and who we have around us, than trying to struggle and fight to live every day. It's not worth it. It's negative energy just takes so much more out of us, and even on our own health effects, than it does to live in a positive environment. So
yeah.
loving life and loving every minute is really important. And I've learned that the hard way, but I'm glad I did so I could share with others.
Oh, that's really good. I know that I'm trying to be really intentional in what I do. And so if I'm going for a walk, I'm looking around, and I'm in the summer, it's like I'm seeing the little wildflowers that I wouldn't not normally even notice. I'm watching for squirrels. Just enjoying the moment
Yeah.
of the walk. Um, just being in, just being present.
That's hard for us because we live in a microwave society and
Yep,
such a fast-paced society. And
yep,
we're trying to keep up with other people, other things, other this, other that. And time is going to go one way or another, right? So it's
it
how we
is.
choose to spend it.
So I'm just trying to enjoy the time that I'm in at this moment.
I agree with you. It's
Yeah.
a lot easier than trying to control or think or worry about all the other things, right?
Well, it's taken some discipline to do this, to learn how to do this.
It
Uh,
does. It's a mindset.
it
It is a
is
mindset.
definitely, but it's been worth it to figure it out.
Yes, and it definitely is helpful.
Yeah. Well, thanks for your words of encouragement. Unfortunately, there's too many women that are in this situation, but I know that you've brought some words of hope. Um, and that's what that was a good message to bring to anybody. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
We'll see you again next time.
All right. Thank you. Have a great evening.
Okay, bye-bye for now.